the PYM.
Again, that. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So Covered's an Arab heritage wear street brand, founded 4 years ago. Actually, when I was in university, I was really sick and tired of these fast fashion retailers taking our prints and our pattern and our heritage and just westernizing it without really acknowledging, the history and the heritage that comes behind it. So I was really inspired to start that. I went to fashion school, so I kind of started it in my undergrad, and then ever since, we fortunately have been able to grow and reach a wider audience and really share that movement with everyone within social media and globally as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Nice.
Of course.
Thanks for being here.
Who's next?
Yeah, silence because hey everybody, so my name is Rana, joining you live from the Palestinian Youth Movement. We are a grassroots transnational organization focused on working with Arab and Palestinian youth all throughout the diaspora.
Okay. So before I start with you, Jalal, I just wanted to introduce myself, why I'm here with Toronto Palestine Film Festival. I'm an artist. I'm in Ramallah right now, but I grew up on the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe in Ottawa. And what I mean by unceded is that these were lands that were never handed over with the treaty to the state of Canada. They were never legally signed over in any way. I mean, the treaties also have their own issues of course, an unequal power dynamic, but a great portion of Canadian land is unceded, meaning that it's not legally owned by the Canadian state and was seized by the colonial power, which is very familiar language for us here in Palestine. I just wanted to say that as we're gathering here to talk about settler colonial violence and apartheid, that we also lend our solidarity to Indigenous peoples around the world who are struggling for self-determination and dignity. Canada and Israel are allies for a reason, and it goes back to their very foundations, and Canada really is one of those states that paved the way for Israeli settler colonialism. And it's important that we keep those links visible. Thanks to Toronto Palestine Film Festival for inviting me. I actually produced my first film in a TPFF residency, and I'm really grateful to them for support over the years. The plans are I disconnect. Mohammed El-Kurd come on in a little bit, and Yara Hawari right after, and then we're going to end the night with Maysa Daw. I wanted to start by asking you, so this month is called we've been calling kind of colloquially the Unity Uprising. And one of the things that we've really seen is that youth have been at the forefront of what we've been, like, of all the actions that we've seen on the streets, the strikes, all of the organized collective action. And I think also we've seen a kind of melting of the cynicism. I wonder if you could talk about what you've been seeing in Jerusalem, what you've been seeing in the youth around you.
Yes, I did want to start on a very optimistic note. I've been feeling very optimistic here in Palestine, on the ground in Palestine, in Jerusalem. It's very obvious when you speak to people and when you are out on the street. There is a sense of optimism that's we've not really seen before. It's the whole movement, what we're seeing right now, the mobilization across the boundaries of what they've set up to separate us, to fragment our societies from 48 Palestine to the West Bank to Jerusalem and Gaza. The boundaries they've set up are crumbling. The Palestinian identity is finding itself as one between the river and the sea, and everyone is along with this identity and this movement. we haven't seen this before. To have a general strike that encompasses the entirety of the Palestinian territory, that is unique. That is something we've not seen in a lifetime, even more than a lifetime, since 1936, the Great Strike. Not a single movement has united Palestinians across the entirety of Palestine as much as we are seeing today. At the same time, I just went for a very short nap in the afternoon. I felt sleep deprived, very tired, and I just felt uncomfortable throughout my whole nap. Just the usual anxious feeling, feeling unsafe. I had a light anxious sleep where I was thinking, I'm in Jerusalem. I feel I feel hostility towards me in Jerusalem. I feel those border police, the ones who are in their green suits, the militarized police in Jerusalem. They're harassing everyone. They're hostile to Jerusalemites. They are, they in my dream were like this cause of an anxiety. And then as soon as I was very uncomfortable, woke up, opened my Twitter, and as soon as I opened my Twitter, I see this video of this kid who was hit by a car. He was chased by a police car in Jerusalem. Military police, of course. They're not regular police. They are occupation enforcers. And he was attacked, dislited on his bike for putting a Palestinian flag on his little bike. This is just of the Israeli Zionist establishment, from their police forces in 48 in Jerusalem, to their militarized police in Jerusalem, to the IDF in the West Bank, saying there is a very concise revenge campaign against Palestinians who dare to speak up. That is uniting between people. It's uniting us across the board, but at the same time they're really out for revenge, and you can see the hate in their eyes. You can see and feel the anger and how they are approaching.
Yeah, I was just saying to some friends that, you know, some of the most cynical people I know were raising the flag and chanting slogans, and it was like something came back to life in them over this past month. I know you and I were at the same demo. One of the first demos I came to after coming back to Ramallah from Canada at the very beginning of this march, and it was at nighttime because it was still Ramadan. And we had a funny story because our mutual friend kind of got lost from both of us, and it was like one moment before the Israeli soldiers raided in like an instant and started arresting people, and they shot like 40 tear gas canisters. That happened. I was wondering if you could tell folks about what you've been seeing in the protests that have erupted around the West Bank.
Yeah. I've lived here for a long time now, and I've been part of this protest movement, whether in Jerusalem, in the West Bank, and elsewhere, in villages which were organizing weekly protests, for example. What we saw in this movement, what was unique to this moment specifically, is people came out really angry and really feeling like what's happening in Jerusalem should not be going through this on its own. What's happening in Sheikh Jarrah, at the very center of all of this, ethnic cleansing in Silwan, what's happening at Al-Aqsa. I was also present at Damascus Gate when the Israelis had placed metal barricades to stop the youth from using their own space at Damascus Gate. There was this feeling of anger from Palestinians everywhere. Why are the Israelis feeling comfortable enough to do this to Jerusalemites and to Jerusalem, while Jerusalemites are very brave and radiating courage? So Jerusalem was radiating courage to the entirety of I saw that night. I was very impressed. It was a very spontaneous, like last minute call, just with a day or two of warning, and the subject was not in everyone's mind at the time, but at the same time, people wanted to come out, wanted to protest, wanted to say, we are together, we are West Bank fighting the Israelis in Jerusalem, the colonial project, the apartheid system. And when we deal with the Israeli forces in Jerusalem, we see the hate in their eyes, they're angry, they attack us, they beat us, but we're dealing with them face to face and we're confronting them head on. At the same time, they feel like they can beat us up, they can arrest us, and they can deny us our rights in the city. What happens in the West Bank in protests like in Ramallah and elsewhere, we don't really interact with the soldiers that often, we don't really see them, we don't see their eyes. All we receive from the Israeli end is bullets, gas, bombs. Just out of nowhere, suddenly someone standing next to you is on the ground and is injured or has been shot somewhere, and you're not sure, is it critical, is it a live bullet, is he dying, is he in a position to survive this shot, is it just a rubber bullet? You never know. There's this confusion that they create. They are sitting on a mountaintop and they're just aiming at the protesters who are just walking and protesting and chanting in the street, and suddenly you're seeing people around you fall to the ground out of nowhere, and that's how they're just like using us as targets to shoot. That's what we see in Ramallah, that's what we see in the protests in the West Bank. They are trigger-happy soldiers which are placed on all the junctions for the roads in the West Bank, and when you go to a protest, you have to think a million times, am I going to get shot? Anyone could get shot. But at the same time, the Ramallah protest that we saw on the day of the strike, the general strike on Tuesday, May 18th, that was probably the largest gathering of Palestinians protesting at Beit Il on the northern entrance of the Ramallah since I can ever recall. I can't ever recall a protest that large where the entirety of Palestinian society was present or represented. Children, families, women, a lot of women. Palestinian women are amazing. You see way more women participation in those protests than men, and it's just a huge gathering, and it was inspirational to see that this huge protest is taking place in Ramallah at the same time as tens of other protests taking place everywhere across Palestine, from Al-Fahim to Haifa to Nazareth to Nablus to Hebron to Gaza to Jerusalem. Everywhere was protesting at the same time. The spirit was there and the unity was very strong on the street. We could see it then.
And I mean, they seem to have had the green light to shoot live ammunition. I know that we've been going to demos, we've been overlapping at demos for at least a decade. In your experience, is it really common for them to shoot live ammunition at protesters? Is it really common for them to shoot live ammunition at protesters?
Oh yeah. For example, at the big march during the general strike, there was an exchange of fire, and suddenly the Israeli soldiers were just shooting at people, and there was one Shaheed who was just very far on the hill, and no one thought that would be possible. But at the same time, anyone who understands how those protests work, you always feel like they are aiming at anyone who's protesting, usually kids who are throwing rocks or anyone who's participating in this protest, and they're just trying to target us for fun, shooting the leg or shooting torso or something. But you never know, those are live bullets, they are lethal bullets, they are lethal bullets which could kill. And even a tear gas canister, which they fired at many protesters before, thinking, oh, this is not lethal, we just fire this tear gas canister right in his face, and then boom, a Palestinian man dies, or a Palestinian woman, or anyone could die from gas or from a canister exploding in their chest, or a live bullet hitting somewhere very critical, at a critical organ. They don't really care about the lethal methods they use against us to suppress our protests. As long as we are not a threat to them, we are always subjugated and confined within the cages, within our limits, within the walls they built for us. They don't really care. If whatever we do, they can kill us easily, and the soldier will go home and be probably celebrated at his camp and wherever he is. That's the method. Keep us under control. That's what they're trying to do with their methods of targeting us.
And I think you hit like a really like important dichotomy of like the same day, like the same streets that we marched down, one day 12,000 people feeling like this unbelievable energy. It's the same street that the next day we're walking a funeral procession from someone who was killed at the protest. And it's like, you know, the last month has been full of these two competing emotions.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for coming, Jalal. Can you tell people where they can follow your writing or your work, or you?
of course. Just follow my Twitter. That's more than enough. If you follow my Twitter, saying where I'm writing, I have my own links there as well. So Twitter, Jalal, AK_Jalal. Thank you very much.
Awesome. And the Toronto Palestine Film Festival, I think, tagged you in the last few tweets. So
They did.
people want to just find you there.
That's correct.
It was great to connect with you.
Yes.
I think you have to leave.
Leave.
You have to leave so that I can bring Mohammed on. Is Mohammed with us? Oh, there you are.
Yes.
Hi, how are you?
Hi. Long time no see. How are you?
Good. Your internet seems like it's going well.
Yeah.
Okay, welcome back everyone. Sorry, we just paused for a sec because of internet issues. Mohammed, I don't know where to start. I guess we could say there's a settler from Long Island that's in your house right now. And I know that you and your sister have been doing everything you can to speak about the violent ethnic cleansing that you guys are facing firsthand. What kind of updates do you want people to hear about Sheikh Jarrah? Or what do you want people to know?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I hope the internet connection is clear enough. What I want people to know is that Sheikh Jarrah is currently under a blockade and has been for a few weeks. We are facing an illegal blockade where no Palestinians are allowed inside our neighborhood, not even medics, not even journalists. Meanwhile, Israeli settlers, most often armed with their rifles, can just walk into the neighborhood, no questions asked. Of course, this translates into hyper state settler violence. This is a clear partnership where settlers and the Israeli state are colluding and participating together in our own terrorizing, be it by invading our homes on the regular, be it by stealing our things like our speaker system, or vandalizing, or having like actual officials in the Israeli Knesset or in the Israeli Council vandalize our murals. We've been having threats that they're going to burn our homes. And yeah, so that's the situation in Sheikh Jarrah. I will also say that that situation extends beyond Sheikh Jarrah. It's happening in Silwan, where 800 people are threatened with losing their homes at the hands of Israeli settler organizations that are registered in the United States. This is happening also in Isawiyah. It's happening all across Jerusalem. And I think when we speak about colonialism in Sheikh Jarrah, it's really important to contextualize it within the larger Zionist project for colonizing the entirety of Al-Quds, of occupied Jerusalem.
Yeah, and I think like one of the reasons that like your stories and what's happening in Sheikh Jarrah and in Jerusalem really spoke to all of Palestinians across historic Palestine was because so many of us have lived that exact story. In 1948 or in 1967 or some point in between. I know that you guys have been, like, this is not a fight that just started for you guys either. Do you want to take us back to when it started in your neighborhood?
Definitely, Yani, like you said, this is a fight as old as the Zionist project, because the Zionist project hinges on ethnically cleansing the indigenous Palestinian population. And like you said, many of our grandparents, our fathers even have been displaced from their homes many times. In Sheikh Jarrah, the story begins in 1972 when Israeli settler organizations began claiming ownership to our lands. Now, it's really important to understand that the Israeli court system is inherently colonial, is inherently supremacist and racist. It allows settlers to claim things that Palestinians are not allowed. And when the judge is a settler, when the jury is a settler, when the laws are written by a bunch of settlers, then you know they are going to side with settlers. They're never going to stand with you against settlements. I think that's an important distinction to make. So since 1972, we have been fighting to protect our homes. Unfortunately, we've already lost 4 homes, Ghawi, Hanoun, half of my home, and another Kurd family that lives up the street. When we talk about Palestinian homes, we're talking about multi-generational homes. So we're talking about multiple families within the same house, multiple households within the same building, and we have lost so many of them. Today, 550 Palestinians in Sheikh Jarrah risk the imminent threat of forced displacement. And we've been fighting, for 49 years, over 49 years, more recently for the past 13 years, and more recently in the past year, since October 2020. We have been in a non-stop battle against ethnic cleansing, and that battle has been met with nothing but brute force and fascism at the hands of the Israeli occupation forces, who clearly have a vendetta against us.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, most of the way that I think that folks like you have been getting the information out there has been on social media. And a few hours ago, we heard that Netanyahu had tried to shut down social media in, I'm not sure which territory exactly, but had tried to shut down social media in some areas, but members of his government had blocked it. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think, let's draw some conclusions for folks. So like you said, Netanyahu was trying to block off social media in occupied Palestine. A week before, Benny Gantz and Naftali Bennett were pleading to Facebook and TikTok to remove Palestinian content. And for years, we've known that these social media giants have been censoring Palestinian voices. I mean, I speak this from experience, even knowing that my views or my interactions have gone down drastically, maybe 50% than they were. But I think this sends a clear message to the people who are listening to us. This means that the social media is working. What we're doing is not, a post or a picture or a retweet is not going to liberate Palestine. But the project we are tackling at hand is maintaining an unprecedented radical shift in the narrative. Mm-hmm. When our voices for years and years and years have been muzzled, also silenced. This is one of the few breakthroughs we're making in the mainstream, where we're making the Palestinian cause a mainstream cause, and it's happening. Where also the significance of the Sheikh Jarrah situation and the Silwan situation is that the framework has shifted from this is about human rights violations to this is about settler colonialism, under which there will be human rights violations. And I think people are finally able to crack the code that if you address settler colonialism, then you no longer have human rights violations. So to people, I think there's like 1,600 people listening to us. I think it's really important to post as much as you can and continue to do so. It's not just about raising awareness. It's about this is a resistance that is accumulative, and it will conjure up change in the coming weeks, months, years.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. That's the title of the event today. Don't Stop Talking About Palestine.
Exactly.
Before I let you go, you gave us so much information in such a short time. Is there anywhere that people can follow your work or the movement to save Sheikh Jarrah and Silwan?
Yeah, don't follow me. No, you can follow me. You can follow my Instagram. You can look under the hashtag Save Sheikh Jarrah. I also encourage everybody to start tweeting under hashtag Save Silwan. Educate yourself about Silwan. Like I said, 800 Palestinians are facing the imminent threat of ethnic cleansing in Silwan. I think it's really important to keep this. Settlements and colonization in Palestine has never stopped. And it hasn't reached its peak today either. But what's happening is that we're not letting them get away with it without documenting it and exposing it. So you can follow me here, you can follow me on Twitter, you can follow me anywhere, but really, it's not about what I have to say, it's about what you have to say for the cause. So,
thank you so much. That was great.
Thank you.
Bye, Mohammed.
Thank you. Have a good day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming. Wow, I love that. It's not about what I have to say, it's about what you have to say. I'm just going to invite our next guest. Okay. Our next guest is Yara Hawari, who is a policy analyst and academic. She's Dr. Yara Hawari, actually, a feminist, an activist. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me, Rana. And I'm sorry about this really bad lighting. Palestine is well known for this white strip lighting, which is just horrible.
Yeah, that and our bad internet. Maybe we can just continue in the same kind of thread and talk about, well, we were just talking with Mohammed about social media. So, we've seen censorship come up as a major issue over the last month. We've seen a lot of Palestinian accounts on social media be taken down, or posts taken down, or censored as sensitive content. And you also go on mainstream media a lot as an analyst, and it often feels like the mainstream media is colluding with Israeli apartheid to paint a narrative of equal sides, or just a distorted narrative. Have you seen anything surprising over the last month? What have you noticed? What are your thoughts?
Maybe before I go on to things that have been surprising, I think it's important to point out how the mainstream media subtly creates a bias without people even knowing, and it's done through the lexicon, through words that may seem very basic and simple, narratives that sort of sound very rational, but actually they're painting an entirely different story, a story that isn't actual reality. So the mainstream media always talks about Israel and Palestine as a conflict, which we know very well paints this image of two sides, of parity, of people's in disagreement with one another, and that the solution is for them to come to an agreement. And of course that completely hides from the reality of two unequal sides, and one side with a massive power advantage that's abusing the other side. And that's the sort of very common one that people might start to be recognizing more and more. But then there are subtleties, such as, for example, Palestinians are often talked about as being as dying. You'll hear 20 Palestinians died, whereas Israelis are killed. So they removed the agency from, or the responsibility of how those Palestinians died. And this reminds me very much of Judith Butler's Frames of War, in which she talks about which bodies are grievable. She says that certain places are framed in such a way that they're war zones, that death and destruction become incredibly normalized. And in the case of Gaza, this is what we see in the mainstream media. It has become acceptable that people just die for no reason. But of course we know that there is a reason. The reason is the Israeli siege and occupation of Gaza. Similarly, this time round, we saw mainstream outlets talk about buildings collapsing in Gaza as if they hadn't been hit by huge bombs, Israeli bombs. So they removed that responsibility by talking about things in a very passive way, as if they are natural, as if that they inherently happen in Gaza. And there are so many more examples, and I find even us as Palestinians, we sometimes adopt that language by accident because it has become so deeply embedded in how we talk about here. And I think this is something that we need to also teach ourselves. We do have an indigenous language, the way that we talk about these things. We don't talk about the Israeli Defense Forces. They're not defending anything. We talk about the Israeli occupation forces, or the Israeli, not even Israeli security forces, the Israeli occupation forces. That's the language, that's what we use in Arabic, and that's what we should also use in English when we're talking to mainstream media. Now, I am seeing with this latest escalation on the brutalization of Palestinian bodies, there has been a narrative shift in the media. And I would be cautious not to overstate it. It's happening, but I also think there is so much work to be done. And of course, narrative is not everything. It's important, but it also has to come with material action, right? And that shift, just to give you an example, I was asked on a mainstream US network about ethnic cleansing and settler colonialism. That wouldn't have happened several years ago, I don't think. I mean, I was pretty shocked to be asked about that. I'm very grateful to be given the space in which to talk about that on a mainstream platform. But then, you know, even if we are to talk about the mainstream platform, what is the action behind it, right? Like, what is going to be the outcome of that? You know, we're still seeing things being vetoed at the UN. We're still seeing countries refusing to hold Israel accountable. We're still seeing, you know, the US give complete impunity to Israeli violations. So I think we have to be very careful not to overstate that shift, to recognize it, but also recognize that there's a lot of work to be done.
Mm-hmm. I know that a lot of us are joining from different parts of the world, but because Toronto Palestine Film Festival is based in the country called Canada, I wanted to also point to how some of the trends that, Yara, you talked about, in how the media kind of has shifted the language to distort reality, or to even sometimes just be confusing. Sometimes, you know, you'd look at a headline and you really don't know who was killed and who did the killing. We had some really shocking exposés come out through Vice News and through The Intercept about CBC, which is Canada's national broadcaster, including, for example, the Toronto CBC executive producer telling her journalists that they shouldn't use the word Palestine. And then the only example she gives where you can use it is to refer to Palestinian militants. And we saw other news also saying, you know, every time you report the Palestinian death toll, to say that it's coming from the Hamas-controlled, you know, Palestinian health ministry or whatever, without even probably the word Palestinian. And, you know, just, you know, playing on these discourses that are super racialized to, and which really diminish the value of the lives that are lost. It definitely feels sometimes like we're going up a hill. But it's good to hear also that some of the language is shifting, because that's definitely because of the work that activists are doing on the ground.
And I think that's a crucial point to mention about Hamas as well. You know, we saw it so much in the media. You know, when you brand something as Hamas, it justifies, you know, all kinds of violations and sins, right? So, you know, that the health ministry in Gaza, because the ruling government is the ruling party in Gaza at the moment is Hamas, they're able to brand the health ministry as the Hamas health ministry, and so people automatically make negative connotations. The same with, you know, Gaza entirely. Hamas run Gaza. People are, you know, people sort of justify the atrocities that happen there. But imagine it, you know, being the other way around. Like if it was like in the US, I don't know, the Republican, I don't know what, it wouldn't happen. And so that is used as a smokescreen to cover all kinds of violence. And that's why it's important. You know, people might not think that language and narrative is important, but epistemic violence, this kind of narrative violence, lexicon violence, it leads to material violence. It justifies material violence. And so there are very real consequences to epistemic violence. It contributes to erasure of people. And I think it shouldn't be scoffed at, and it has to be taken incredibly seriously.
Thank you so much. We don't have a ton of time, but I want to give you a chance to comment. So you hail originally from Tarchiha, which is in the north of colonized Palestine, in the area we call 1948 Palestine. And we have seen a really historic participation of Palestinians who hold Israeli citizenship, or 48 Palestinians. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the strike that happened on May 18th. Jalal brought it up. I think Mohammed brought it up as well. Yeah.
So the strike that happened on May 18th was incredible for many reasons. It was called by various different movements and grassroots groups. And it was a call for Palestinians to strike across colonized Palestine, West Bank, Gaza, 48, and beyond as well. And there was an international call for solidarity. And it was a particularly important strike for the Palestinian citizens of Israel, because they constitute quite a large percentage of the workforce in Israel. They're actually 20% of the total population. And, you know, there are different areas in which they constitute a large number of the workforce. In the healthcare sector, for example, 20% of doctors are Palestinian, 20% of nurses are Palestinian. 50% of pharmacies are Palestinian. And in the construction industry, it's nearly 100% Palestinian, either from the West Bank, Palestinians coming from the West Bank to work inside 48, or Palestinian citizens of Israel working for these construction companies. So what happened on the day of the strike was that the construction industry, the Israeli construction industry, halted completely. They lost millions, and it halted completely. And I think the consequences of this strike, it really was historic. And one of the consequences of this was that it sort of gave us a realization, or sort of reawakened that realization that Palestinians have a huge amount of economic power. Not just Palestinian citizens of Israel, but also Palestinians in the West Bank. And I think it's important to explain this point. People think, why don't Palestinians just work in Palestine? Or why don't they just buy Palestinian goods? The Palestinian economy does not exist. There is no such thing called a Palestinian economy. What we have in the West Bank, Gaza, and 48 are occupied fragments of economic production. And these are totally dictated on Israel's terms. Now, in the West Bank and Gaza, after Oslo, this completely came under the control of Israel. We use the Israeli currency across colonized Palestine. Israel also controls completely and puts restrictions on Palestinian production. It floods the Palestinian market with Israeli produce. It makes it very difficult for employment for Palestinians outside. Like a lot of the best employment is in 48 with Israeli companies, and they have complete control over all the levers of the economy. And what the strike did was it reawakened this sort of realization that Palestinians have this incredible power as a demographic force and an economic force. And this is probably the last point that I want to end on. With that realization, there is a continuation of activities. From the 6th of June to the 12th of June, there is a week that focuses on Palestinian produce and asks of Palestinians across colonized Palestine to only buy Palestinian produce for that entire week. And I think things like that are incredibly powerful. It makes Palestinians realize that actually, the power does lie within our hands. We have the ability to liberate ourselves, and that ability comes from a united movement. And this is why this particular uprising has been so incredible, because of that united mobilization across colonized Palestine.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that so much of what has happened over this month has just reinvigorated us and has served such a it feels very empowering, and I'm looking really forward to this kind of buy-in of Palestinian products. We haven't seen too many campaigns like that before, and it's really exciting. Thank you so much for coming and for being so poignant as always. Where can people follow your work?
Mostly on Twitter, I have to say. So you can follow me on Twitter. Also, Shabaka, which is the organization I work for, we do a lot of great analysis by Palestinian analysts. So follow Shabaka and me on Twitter.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rana. Bye.
Yara.
Bye.
All right. Let's bring Maysa on. Just gonna plug in my phone so we don't have any more technical issues. Hi. Maysa, how you doing? You're the only one so far that I haven't actually met, but I've seen you perform and speak many times.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us at this late hour.
Thank you for this talk. It's been amazing hearing everybody speak, and everybody mentioned some amazing points, and I'm really happy to be here. So thank you for doing this.
I think a lot of people know who you are, but if you don't and you're listening, Maysa is a singer, songwriter, a musician, a rapper, also from Haifa. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, not really. An actress, maybe a musician.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, Yara, a few others I think also mentioned how this last month was really marked by this kind of historic participation from Palestinians in 48, or if people aren't familiar with that term, Palestinians who hold Israeli citizenship, who have always participated in some ways in our resistance, but it really feels like a more overt and more collective uprising that we saw over the last month. I was wondering if you could tell us what you saw in the streets, or what you witnessed, what you organized, anything.
Well, I actually have to start by saying that only 2 days ago, I actually really realized and was able to really absorb everything that is going on. I've been in this sort of, I realized this 2 days ago, that I've been in some sort of denial, not really denial, but denial of emotions of what I'm going through and what we are all going through in this time. I think a very important thing to say is whatever is happening now and has been happening for the past month is nothing new. The new thing about it, that it's happening in places that have not happened before, like in Haifa. Born in Haifa, and Haifa, in Israeli culture, let's say it like this, is like the symbol of coexistence, which doesn't exist, of course, but it is the symbol of coexistence. And being able to witness that happening here, from all sides of it, from all, for the good and bad, to be able to witness that with thousands of people in Haifa, that was the moment that I realized that, okay, something is happening here that is not usual, there was some sort of like an unspoken agreement, some sort of a sync between everybody in Sheikh Jarrah, in the West Bank, in Jerusalem, and all of the 48, and in Gaza, and everywhere, that it was so clear, and I don't even know how to explain it, that we needed to go out to the streets and speak about whatever is happening.
Yeah, even at our borders. I mean, we saw Syria, Lebanon, Jordan. I mean, Jordan, it's like very similar. People think people like Palestinians in Jordan haven't been moving for very long, and we saw tens of thousands come to the border in protests.
I mean, in Jordan and in Syria and in Lebanon, people came to the borders, and that's something that is, it's huge. It's huge. And these people have gone through hell to be able to do that, and some of them were caught, and 2 Jordanian guys were in the court 2 days ago in Haifa, in the Israeli court, and they've been under really horrible circumstances and violence and everything, that the worst that you can imagine. But I think, like, to mention it again, that this is nothing new, and this, I don't know if it even makes it worse or better, that this is, I think, and I believe that this is the first time that we get so much international coverage. And I think the main thing is here that people are waking up in a way that we haven't seen before. And the main thing about it is the talk is not even always about Palestine. Like, a lot of people that have been going to the streets won't even raise a Palestinian flag. And it doesn't matter if we agree with it or don't agree with it, but people are realizing how the state is actually working, and the discrimination that this state is actually built on. And we've been seeing a very big wave of Arab people, originally Palestinians, Arab people, that have been serving the Israeli army and have been serving the Israeli police, that are just leaving it right now and writing about it in public. We've been seeing videos. There was a viral video, I don't know if you saw that, for a Palestinian guy that was getting arrested and beaten up by soldiers and police. And he was screaming the whole time, I fought for you, and I fought for you in Gaza, and I fought for you in Gaza, and this is the way that you are treating me. And I think this is a huge thing, because even people that have been numb to the feeling of the things that we've been living, have been waking up to it. And I remember it's even funny for me to say it because it sounds, so, I don't want to say dumb, but it sounds so unrealistic that I remember there was this one point, there was this crazy demonstration in Haifa. There were a few demonstrations, but one of them were really crazy when everything went out of control. The police were going with the horses, the Yassam. They were going with the horses inside restaurants and following people with the horses on the sidewalks. And they were just throwing bombs everywhere, sound bombs, and they were throwing rubber bullets everywhere and just chasing everybody. And there was like 40 arrests that night. And it was really, really crazy. And I remember at some point, and there was, of course, the car that was throwing sewage water on everybody around. And I remember seeing the Israeli protesters on the other side, and they were throwing rocks, and they were chanting death to Arabs, and they were chanting so many hateful things, and the police were attacking us when we were talking about our freedom, and they were throwing bombs at us. And I remember there was this one moment that I was completely terrified, and I was just looking for a place to hide. And for a moment, it hit me, and I looked around me, and I said, this must be how it feels to live this life. And it's not even close to that, because you know what I mean? Because I was dealing with, sound bombs and rubber bullets. It's not even live ammunition, and it's not even airstrikes, but the terror that I was feeling, that was the first time I've been talking and I've been aware of the situation in Gaza and in the West Bank and in Sheikh Jarrah and in all of Jerusalem since I can remember myself, and I've been talking about it since I can remember myself. But this was the first time that I actually had to feel a glimpse of what our people feel. And that was in Haifa, and that was like the easiest demonstration and the easiest clashes that were going on, in all of Palestine at that moment.
Yeah.
So, but what was happening after that, I think the Israeli media was not ready and was not expecting the social media to be so big and the effect of it to be so big. So what was happening after that, and because how I said Haifa is supposedly the symbol of coexistence in this country, so they've been doing everything they can to keep the coexistence look on the city as it is. So they've been arresting people only walking in the streets, and they've been arresting people only for filming. They've been going inside houses and homes at 2, 3, and 4 a.m. in the morning and arresting people for posting a post on Instagram and trying to find every possible reason to arrest people and detain them and charge them when they have no reason at all. There have been around 2,000 arrests of Palestinians, some of them for pointing a middle finger at an officer, some of them for just videotaping what is happening on in the protests, some of them for just going on and standing in front or under their homes, some of them for defending their homes when the settler came. And at the same time, there were live lynches of settlers lynching Palestinian men on live TV. The one in Bat Yam, I don't know if you saw that, but it was so horrible. It was like 100 settlers, Zionist settlers, attacking a Palestinian man, yet none of them are in jail. All of them are free. There have been so many cases on live international and national TV of Zionists screaming death to Arabs on national TV, and none of them have been detained. None of them has been arrested. And those of them have been arrested, they have been released the next day. And at the same time, you see thousands and thousands of Palestinian people being arrested for nothing. And at the same time, there are less than 200 actually proven cases on any of these thousands of people being arrested. So that only shows you, and a lot of these people that got out the day after or 2 days after are banned from being in protests for a month or two, are banned from entering their home or their town for a month or two, are banned from using social media, are banned from so many different things. So that only, for me, that only tells me how scared they are of the power and how much they are trying to take over as much as they can and detaining people only for posting one sentence on social media. And I think that proves a lot. And I think for me, between all of this desperation and all of this sadness and all of this crazy, angry feelings that I've been having, I'm very hopeful because for the first time I'm seeing so many people, not only Palestinians, but around the world, shouting in thousands and hundreds of thousands, you know, and it's the first time that I see people around me that I have been talking to in ages, and they've always tell me, yeah, but what do you want? And this country gives us our rights, and we can study and we can work, and these types of people are actually realizing the truth about the way that we live. And, you know, this makes me hopeful, and I think the hardest thing for me to accept is that this is something that takes time, and to accept that this is not something that we should stop doing. We should keep talking about it, and we should keep posting about it, and we should, you know, keep talking about the good things. And I'm talking about, you know, I'm talking about Haifa and feeling a bit silly talking about Haifa with everything that is going on in Silwan and Sheikh Jarrah, Al-Khalil, Ramallah, Ghazi, everything, every place, you know. But for the first time, this has become a Palestinian issue, and not a West Bank issue, and not a Gaza issue, and this have been talked about from so many layers and from so many people. And the most amazing thing that this voice is coming from the people, and it's coming from authority, and it's not coming from the government. It's coming from people on the ground, documenting what is happening and talking about what is happening. And this think that have been happening even with the strike, you know. I was talking with my friend, and she was posting about the strike for so long, and I was posting with her, and suddenly I get a poster from a friend of mine from Jerusalem with the same date for the strike, and then at the same time someone from I don't know where sends me, hey, we want to make a strike on the same date. And suddenly Lajnat al-Mutaba, you know, they make a big announcement that this is the date, and nobody even talked about that, but it was, you know, synced, and we all sort of agreed that on the 18th there's going to be a strike. So I don't know, I'm always sort of shifting and drifting between being very angry and wanting to fight, but being very hopeful, and I don't know if I want to say excited, but I'm very interested of what is going to come next. And I know that it's going to take time, and I know that it's not going to be easy, but I'm very interested, and I'm hopeful for what is to come.
I think you just are touching so beautifully on so many of the things that, you know, we've started to talk about today. People who are your age and my age, I mean, a lot of our generation only remembers the repression of the Second Intifada. People don't really remember the like collective power feeling. And so I think a lot of people underestimate the power of like what colonialism here has done to people's minds, to just absolutely make it impossible to imagine or to hope. And I mean, you spoke a lot about Arab, Druze, Palestinians who joined the army even, and sometimes that shocks people, but the level to which colonialism seeps into people, I mean, it's really hard to explain if you're not experiencing it. But what we saw was that a lot of people, as soon as the hope became something imaginable, a lot of people were ready to fight. And that's really just, I mean, it's a powerful feeling. I wanted to ask you also, I mean, I wanted to also say that you mentioned the campaign to arrest 2,000 people over the last few days even.
Yeah, there were thousands of arrests, but the campaign, which is actually funny, you know, if I have a moment to speak about that as well. About a week ago, maybe less, the Israeli police announced this campaign of arresting 500 Palestinians all over, you know, Palestine, including Palestine 48, including the West Bank and everything. So what this announcement caused was a lot of panic, of course, because like even for us, everybody, like even being live here now, it puts me at risk. Even though I'm not saying anything wrong and I'm just expressing what I feel and I'm talking about facts, it puts us under threat of being arrested, you know. And what this thing did was put a lot of panic, and in a try to make people, you know, talk less about it or shut people up. But the thing is that it took me time to realize. Suddenly I just looked and I was like, but wait, until that day there were about 1,500 arrests, and nobody announced that, you know, but they were still going inside people's houses at night and arresting them. They were still going in the streets and finding people just standing outside their houses and arresting them for no reason whatsoever and releasing them the next day. Yeah. So you start to realize as well that even that, just announcing that they are going to arrest 500 people when they've been doing it for 2 weeks already and not announcing them, is probably two reasons. One is to scare the Palestinians, to make them stop whatever they are doing. And two, to reassure the Israeli people that everything is under control and that we are arresting all of these people. And to remind us again that all of the people that were shouting death to Arabs were not arrested. And all of the people that lynched Palestinian men on live TV were not arrested. And to remind us that there was a house, a burnt house in Jaffa that was burnt by settlers. And still the media is trying to convince us that it was Arabs that burned down that house because they thought that it was an Israeli house when the house was filled with Ramadan decoration. And there's no way that you could miss that it is a Palestinian house. So it has so many layers, and we're still trying to even understand what it means. And, you know, this whole attack on the social media, like talking about myself, the average of views that I would get for a story is between 9,000 and 11,000. And right now I'm getting barely to 2,000 people, barely views on a story. So you can see this from every side possible, you know, but it's still happening and we're still talking about it. And that's the most amazing and empowering thing that could happen, and we're still getting our voices out there, which is amazing.
And that's why the title of this event, which I forgot to type in when I set up the live, is Don't Stop Talking About Palestine. Maybe one last question before we wrap up. I mean, you're an artist. I would love to hear what you think the role of artists is, or maybe just your personal role if you don't want to speak about them generally, in uprisings here and abroad.
Well, I have to say that since everything started, the last thing that was on my mind is music. And it took me 2 weeks to even be able to listen to music, you know. But then now I'm getting more and more into it, and I've been realizing more and more as I was posting all about this, and Yara talked about this as well, and I loved what she said, and that the language is so important at the moment. The words that we choose. And I think the most amazing thing about art in general, not only music, is that it can touch feelings on so many levels and so many different feelings. And that's the power of it. And I think for me, speaking as a musician, I know, like, I have this song, let's say like this, I have this song that I really love. It was one of the first songs that I've ever written. It's called بكفي عاد, which means enough. And for the first time, whatever is happening now, I can't even say that بكفي عاد represents or touches me on a personal level in whatever is happening now. Because in some way, I feel that بكفي عاد in a way is, I love that song, I adore that song, I really love it, I love singing it. But I think in some place it falls under the victim status. And I think what I've been feeling, the most powerful thing that I've been feeling now is that it's not playing the victim anymore. It's taking action. It's taking things under control. It's choosing the words that we want to use. It's whether it's eviction or settler colonialism or, you know, ethnically or whatever. You can take it to any word if you want to say anger or if you want to say hope or if you want to say this and if you want to say that. I think that words have such an important role on the way that we observe things and the way that our subconscious observes things. And it's not only words, it's the colors that we choose. It's the way that we choose to express what we are doing. It's the moves that we are making. It's the expressions that we are making. And I think what I really feel strongly about that right now is there's a shift in energy between what has happened until today and what is happening today. And I think the main thing that at least I would love to emphasize in my music and in my art is that, to try to support that energy shift as much as I can, to be able to use the right words and the right expressions and to talk about it, you know. And when I say also talk about it, I don't mean only talk about the massacres, and I do not mean only talk about the war, because we are more than that. We are not only the war, we are not only the occupation, we have amazing culture. We have such a rich culture that we should be proud of. And that's what I love seeing lately, that a lot of people have been showing, music as well and dancing as well. And I think that's a very important part that we should not forget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love how you kind of explain the shift in how you feel about that song even, and I think that makes sense. Our art will always be shifting with us, and I kind of felt the same way. Like all the things I liked to do in April, I suddenly didn't want to do in May. Like everything changed, it felt, and even the things that I would have thought were corny or didactic before, I was like, no, this is what we need to hear right now. We need the slogans. We need to be like raising the flag. Like all these things that, we had built a lot of cynicism or had started to feel kind of stale and not producing new emotions. Suddenly we're producing something new, and that is really exciting. I want to say to people, I love seeing that a lot of people have been posting Palestinian artists and Palestinian photographers and Palestinian, fashion designers and all of that are not necessarily connected to whatever is happening now. And I think this is such an important part as well, to support all of the positive things that we are doing, and not only to talk about the negative things, and not only to be stuck in the reaction mode, because a lot of time we react, we don't plan ahead. We react to whatever is happening now. And for me, supporting other artists and other people and other talkers and other designers and everything from every field possible, that is one of the most important things to do. Because other than finishing whatever violence and occupation that is happening now, we need to build, and we need to be able to do and to express. And to do that, these two things together, I think is very important, and it brings such an important balance to whatever is happening. And I'm cut you off by No, yeah, and a humanity. I mean, it was kind of what Yara was pointing to. I mean, Palestinians are always being analyzed, always being studied, always in the news, dying or in tragedy. And until we're seen in all of our different forms, that's the only way that a person can be seen as human. I wanted to say that in Canada, there's a letter that's going around. It's in the bio of my Instagram, which is linked on the Toronto Palestine Film Festival page, for artists and cultural workers to sign on to support Palestine, but kind of specifically to call on Canada to impose sanctions on Israel and to abide by the boycott movement. And we've seen so many artists, actually this isn't new, but we've seen so many artists step up and make statements like this and recognize the political power of their art, even if their art has nothing to do with Palestine. And Israel
always has something to do with Palestine. Whatever it is, the most cheesy love story, it always has to consciously with something, and it's a part of it that we should not forget as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Where can people listen to your music and follow your work and your activism and everything?
Well, music you can find anywhere: YouTube, Spotify, iTunes. My name is Maysa Daw, and I'm also a part of DAM, D-A-M, so you can find both of these two things everywhere. And mostly I'm active on Instagram, so you can follow me here, and make sure to follow all of the amazing speakers that have been here tonight, and to follow whatever is happening and all of the names that have been rolling around for news and for everything, to get a fuller idea of everything happening.
Thank you so much. I loved what you did there. I love meeting you. فرصة سعيدة. Thanks for being with us at 10:20 p.m. We're ready to go to sleep over here. I want to also thank Toronto Palestine Film Festival for giving us their platform tonight, and for supporting us in so many different ways over the years. And to KUVRD and to the PYM, the Palestinian Youth Movement, if you're not following them, follow them. They're the two other folks on this call. Rami and Savannah, if you have any parting words, you can say now. I just wanted to thank everyone, thank all of the guests who came, and everyone who's listening. We appreciate you, and I hope that everyone keeps talking about Palestine. The only thing that will make it easier to talk about Palestine and not face attacks is if more people talk about Palestine. I mean, it's our collective power that makes it safer, that makes it more empowering, and that inspires our imaginations. So thank you, everyone. Have a great night.